Hi everyone, my name's Phillip Vaughan. I'm a senior lecturer at Abertay University up in Dundee, and I'm also a co-investigator and head of partnerships at the CoStar Real-Time Lab, which is a virtual production studio volume in Water's Edge, which is a state-of-the-art facility down at the City Quay in Dundee. And we were really interested in looking at game technology and utilising game technology in film and television, and also enhancing the location offering that we have here in Dundee for film and television work, which brings us nicely onto the book that we're going to talk about today, which is Lights, Camera, Dundee, Filming Locations in Dundee, Tayside and Angus. And we're lucky enough to have both Julie and Tom here to talk principally about this book. I'd just like to ask you both where the idea for this book came from, and how you came to be publishing these type of books.
Hi Phil, it's good for you to come and do this podcast for us. We just love Dundee. That was the starting point for that. We've been, as publishers, coming up to Dundee with various titles for a good few years, and we just love the progressive nature of the city. And it was Tom's background is cinema and film, so it was the kind of obvious combination, if you like, to then look at the films in Dundee and the surrounding area.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the amazing thing about Dundee, there's all sorts of really good things about Dundee, the architecture, that, the urban atmosphere. But the thing that really makes it is its people. And one of the things that really comes across so many different films and TV series really is the people of Dundee and how they make the place what it is. So, that's something that we really thought was worth celebrating.
It's always fascinated me that we have such a vibrant film and television industry in Scotland. Hailing from Dundee myself, though, there wasn't a lot of evidence of it growing up, or certainly it wasn't very obvious when it was being used as a location, because we tended to lose a lot of the production work to Glasgow and Edinburgh or beyond, actually. So I wonder if you can maybe talk us through in some of your research into some of the earlier film and TV productions that have happened in the city, and what kind of production work that would actually entail.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we really were interested in was going way back to 1911, how D.C. Thomson had been, such a really enthusiastic adopter of film technology and, of course, later television technology. And he was determined to use it as not just as an advertising tool, but as something that was informative, something that could bring something like newspaper production to people's attention, that they could actually have an inside view of it in ways that perhaps they otherwise wouldn't have had. So that was a really interesting one. I mean, there are documentary films going way back to the 19th century of the Tay rail bridge. So I mean, it's a heritage, a cinematic heritage that goes back that far. But even in the 40s, you have films like The Silver Fleet with Ralph Richardson, part of which was filmed on the Dundee waterside, and then even the Hatter's Castle, which I think still today is the only film to depict the Tay Bridge disaster on celluloid. So there's loads and loads of really interesting stuff going on decades back. But then you get into a period where there are a lot of interesting documentary footage. 1939, there was a brilliant documentary about Dundee and how it had changed, how industry had changed the city and how it had grown as a result of it. And the screening of that film had to be abandoned because, as it happened, war broke out on the evening of the screening. And it wasn't really seen widely until many years later. So yeah, I mean, there's all of these really fascinating curiosities before we start getting into the 80s and 90s and films become slightly more prolific.
And What do you think about the geographical location and how much that has to do with it? Because I always feel like it's somewhat kind of underutilized as a location, sitting on the Tay. The lighting is quite different. The weather on this coast is quite different from the west coast. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that the environment has informed some of the films and the filmmaking that's happened here.
I think that's really true. I think you're probably right. It is underutilised for what is available in the area. When you look at some of the different films that have come out, you're talking about things like Russia and Dundee. You've got Shakespearean and Clam's Castle. We've got golf. There's the Gothic, horror, historical, modern, and everything in between. So it's one of these wonderful cities that you can dress it up. As you rightly say, there's some really atmospheric places around about beaches and the coastline itself, which lends itself so well. Lighthouses in Arbroath. There's so many different places that you can go, and each of the films and the videos tells a different story about Dundee and Angus. And I think sometimes it's like everything else, when it's on your doorstep, you don't necessarily think about it as much. And I think it's a lot to be said for the fact that we should be celebrating its flexibility as a location and perhaps using it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that actually bleeds into the talent as well. The talent is available. Obviously, having worked at both universities in the city and principally involved in filmmaking, animation, storytelling, again, which comes back to DC Thomson. There's a rich heritage of that kind of talent in the city as well. And what we tend to find at the university is it's quite difficult to hold on to that talent in the area. And I'm talking about talent as well, not just behind the camera, but in front of the camera as well. I think it's quite interesting when you see some of the names and some of the productions that you speak about in the book. There's some familiar names that pop up on a few different productions, some local actors and beyond. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that and about that kind of talent pool, if you want, in the city.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that jumped out at us, actually. I mean, you think of people like Brian Cox, one of Dundee's favoured sons, and all of the different features that he's taken part in that have celebrated Dundee and the surrounding area. But then there are less well-known people, which has interested me. There was a film called Time Teens: The Beginning, which was predominantly filmed in and around Perth, but it featured some location filming in Angus and places like Forfar. Now, that was an amazing film for the simple reason that they managed to accomplish so much on such a limited budget. And they brought in people like Andy Gray, who, of course, had been Chancellor in City Lights and amongst many other things. And then even films like Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson, who's not someone that you would necessarily associate with Angus or the Dundee area, but lots of very atmospheric filming round about Auchmuty Beach near Arbroath. So, that's, of course, something that has continued because Frankenstein, the new Guillermo del Toro version, is coming out later this year. And that famously, was also filmed in Arbroath amongst many other locations. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it is an area that is drawing in increasingly popular and well-known actors and also directorial talent.
Yeah, and I think that extends to something that we're interested in at Abertay, is the visual effects work as well. I've taught quite a lot of students who have gone on to work in, on big features or Industrial Light and Magic, for example, and to working on Marvel films and Star Wars and all those franchises, and it always kind of fascinates and frustrates me a little bit that we lose a lot of that talent. So do you think it's important that this industry grows in the area so that we don't just retain the talent, who are coming here to film, but also the post-production work as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that, actually, because it's a thing I've often discussed, particularly with students at Forth Valley College when I've been doing the publication course, is people often say to me, do you think films aren't as good as they used to be? And the honest answer to that is, there are tremendous films coming out in every genre every year that are independently produced. A lot of them will not be in the big mainstream cinemas, but if you're willing to dig, there's going to be something out there that you will enjoy. It doesn't matter whether it's a Western or sci-fi or comedy. Just because some of the big studios have been, quite risk averse and have tended to show films that are perhaps, a remake of a prequel or whatever. It doesn't mean to say that that's the case right across the board, because there's so much originality to be found in independent filmmaking. And I think, Angus and Tayside are absolutely at the forefront of that. When you look at a whole load of really interesting independent films. Now that can be horror, it can be these sort of mumblecore style discursive films, which riff on people like Richard Linklater and Eric Romer. There's just so much out there to enjoy. So, I think for that reason, the area has attracted not just talent, but real originality.
I was just going to say, I think as well, you have so much to offer, and it's one of those things that people just have to be more aware of, all the advantages of actually being in Dundee, to come and stay here and look at the diversity of what's here in the way of filming, locations, and all the great things that you do as well, in Abertay as well, just to encourage people to come and stay. That's a real interest, not just here locally, but internationally as well for you.
I think, yeah, and to back that up, we've done over the years, not just at Abertay, but when I was at University of Dundee as well, did a lot of work with Julie Craik and Tayside, who are huge champions of this area, including Perth and Angus, and it's a huge kind of coverage area. I think they do a fantastic job of kind of promoting this area and getting some amazing productions here. And I think it's a bit like what we always say at the universities, we tend to punch above our weight a little bit. And I think it's kind of the same when it comes to this type of work. And it's also one of the reasons why we're really excited to have this virtual production studio in Dundee, not in Glasgow or Edinburgh where you'd expect it to be, because it does open up the potential to production companies to use the location, the physical locations, but also to use the studio space here to augment those shoots and to use the studio as a kind of bolt on to the area. So we're really keen as well to kind of promote the area as a whole. It sounds really weird when you're talking about virtual production, but virtual production is nothing without the locations you put onto the screen, essentially. So we have a rich heritage of that, and we really want to push that, and we certainly really want to push that to independent filmmakers, new filmmakers with different visions, as well as the big Hollywood features, which we've seen use the locations here. So I wonder, what would your advice be to a fledgling filmmaker about doing a recce maybe in this area? What would you say would be the places to look out for? What are things that have cropped up in films in the past, locations that have popped up which might have potential? Is there any kind of hidden gems in this area that you could sort of recommend?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it kind of reminds me of when Peter Jackson filmed Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, and said it was one of the best places to be because you only had to travel, a few miles in any given direction to have a completely different environment. And I think Angus is a bit like that as well. I mean, you have those wonderful sort of sweeping coastal shots that you can have in places like Arbroath and Montrose. You have that, that wonderful sort of stately grandeur in places like Glamis Castle. You have the urban sprawl in inner city Dundee. You have the sort of seaside charm of somewhere like Carnoustie. So I mean, there's really so much to recommend it. It really is the sort of place that offers every kind of terrain and environment. Actually, it reminds me of the Englishman Abroad. When that was filmed in the early 80s, that at the time it was being filmed, there had been heavy snowfall, which hadn't reached Dundee, and that meant that the Dundee City Council had to put something like, was it 50 tons of salt out to make it simulate snowfall, and that all had to be cleared away before the morning so it didn't get in the way of pedestrians. And then, of course, directly after it, there was a blizzard. So it just goes to show, how these environments can go from one extreme to another.
I think as well, the flip side of that, as you say, there's so many interesting places to go. Another thought when we were pulling the book together was, what about when it comes to tourism? Because film tourism is becoming an increasingly interesting thing to a lot of people. The whole Braveheart, Outlander type idea of coming to see where all these things are filmed. So the pictures in the book lend themselves to go and see where these things are in the place. Hopefully we'll drive tourism in the area. And also there's QR codes in the back of the book as well. So, come and have a look. Find out when Graham's Castle's open to go in and get your pictures taken outside, or go and have the tour, or see all the places that when you go to the Hallmark movies, you saw that, I recognise that. You can actually go and see it. So I think that was another prong to the approach of the whole idea of the book as well, because there's just so much to give in the area too from that point of view.
Yeah, I know you already do some tours yourselves of for other endeavours that you've been a part of. So this would certainly extend itself to that, and it's actually becoming quite weirdly a spectator sport. I was actually through in Glasgow recently when they were filming the new Spider-Man film, and I was quite astounded by how they'd set up the shoot to accommodate the locals, and also certainly kids who are able to watch Spider-Man being filmed and actually see Spider-Man and actually meet the actors, which I thought was really interesting, the way that they'd kind of constructed the set to be quite inclusive, actually, way more inclusive than it used to be, when it would be kind of closed sets, and there would be maybe shooting in the middle of the night or early in the morning to avoid the crowds. Glasgow would actually seem to be encouraging the interaction of the crowds, and I think it would be really nice to see that kind of extended to this area as well, because it is a boost for tourism. It is a boost for the area, for the businesses here. Okay, they might have a bit of disruption where you're closing off streets and things like that, but ultimately it generates a lot of income for Scotland. So I wonder what your thoughts are on and how you showcase kind of apart from your book, which obviously is showcasing the previous work, and right up to date. I have to say it does come right up to date to a couple of things that are not even out yet, which is great to see. But how do you think we could showcase this area even better?
I think, as in all things, when we all look at funding and where our pots of cash are for different things, it boils down to partnership working. It boils down to us actually talking to one another. So whether it's business, whether it's film, whether it's tourism, Scottish government as a whole in the UK, I think there's big conversations to be had that benefits everybody by actually coming on board and doing it. It's just how we harness all of that to get the correct agencies together, to pull together, to find that one cause that supports everybody.
Yeah, and you mentioned, of course, the importance of the CoStar real-time lab and how that's able to bring all sorts of different terrains and different environments into one place. But the thing that certainly from what I've experienced in terms of these different films and TV series, is the character of Dundee. It's the people of Dundee that make the difference, and it's something that can communicate that kind of can-do, progressive, forward-looking kind of attitude that's in the city now. Anything that's able to encompass that, and you see it a lot in music videos actually, where Dundee's very much depicted as being a very vibrant place, somewhere that's very urbanized and sophisticated. I think that's a great thing, because it's opening up so many opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think something that impressed me about the book is the level of research, and we kind of chatted earlier off here about a lot of this isn't known. Certainly some of these were news to me. I'm looking through it and going, oh, I didn't know that was here, or didn't know they came this location to film that, or I didn't know that movie or TV show actually used this location at all. So how do you feel about that kind of that hidden kind of aspects of it, whether it's it's something that isn't well publicized, or whether it is the city doubling up for somewhere else? I mean, there's huge potential for that. You look at Glasgow, it's being used a lot for New York. Do you see the potential there to do some more of that kind of work?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you just have so much to offer, and I think the imagination is the only thing that ever holds anyone back. It's about, how can we pitch things forward? How can we move things forward with all this new technology to change things, as you say, in ways that maybe have taken, I don't know, weeks and weeks to do things. You'll know that yourself, how quickly having all this new technology can then help to change that, don't you think,
yeah,
Tom?
And I mean, you look at that tremendous architecture in inner city Dundee, it really is very close to the kind of architecture you see near George Square in Glasgow. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't have Marvel visiting Dundee for a future epic.
Absolutely. And what I love as well, as Tom's mentioned, the people. I think when we were doing the research for the book, it was really interesting, even if the films weren't about Dundee, to see the progression of the types of films that were getting made in Dundee. Yes, initially when we went back to the Dundee, it was all about Jutron Jam, and everybody talked about it like this. And then after that, it was just how you could see the industry change and the arts change, and how the industrialism of the area changed things as well, didn't it? So
yeah,
that was really fascinating from a totally different point of sociology style of things, to see the differences within Dundee and the surrounding areas, and potentially how maybe the films have changed it and vice versa.
Yeah, and you start to see that realism creep in films like Christabel, various different films where everything's been redressed. And I remember seeing those photographs of the Murraygate, where modern shops had been redressed to look like they were Cyrillic Russian locations and sort of Muscovite venues. So it's interesting to see those things, because you get that application of realism, but also kind of verisimilitude, as they're taking well-known Dundee landmarks and reshaping them into something else entirely.
I think that is a really interesting aspect of it, and it does have that kind of urban kind of grit, I suppose, because it's such a small city centre that everything's very well connected, and we found the connectivity in the city, not just the geographical connectivity, but the creative connectivity, is something that is a real asset to Dundee, where some bigger cities kind of suffer a bit from being a bit disconnected. I think that's something interesting that happened. And again, you mentioned this movie in the book, and it's coming right up to date because the trailer has just been released for this. But California Scheming, which was shot in the city of James McAvoy's directing that, and the crew that were on that shoot, we had the same crew in our studio the week before doing a short production with us. And I asked a couple of the crew what they were doing next week, and they said, "Oh, we're actually filming just across the road at the back of Abertay, which is the bottom of the hill town, for this California Scheming film." And so again, you've got this weird connectivity where you've got a virtual production studio here, you've got quite an urban environment there, and you can literally walk across the road to it. So that accessibility, I think, is quite interesting as well, and how you can basically walk from one end of the city to another in about 20 minutes. And it's something we're finding with our students as well, who are mostly international students. It's a mixed cohort. We have some local students, and it's actually seeing the city through other people's eyes, which I think actually really shines a light on it. Because I think you mentioned it earlier on, you tend to kind of take it for granted when you're sitting on your own doorstep, and you don't tend to look up. One of my old art tutors told me a really valuable lesson is that when you're walking through the city, you look up, because you tend to look at street level. And it's when you look up in Dundee in particular that you see this sort of Gothic architecture, which is quite intimidating actually, as well as being beautiful to look at. So I again, I just think it's about getting more people to the city with some vision, and looking at it through fresh eyes. That's not to say we exclude the local community, because we want to encourage that as well. But I do think that you get the best out of a location by looking at it from a different perspective. And I thought that was really interesting to see some of the more recent films here, either using the city as itself, or they're going completely the opposite for that. You know, when you look at the Frankenstein work, and that's obviously using the Arbroath, for example, Stonehaven as well, as something very, very different. So you know, again, I wonder what your feelings are on where this goes next, and you know, and what your feelings are on how we can attract even more creators to this area.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things that jumped out at both of us actually when we were working on the book together was that sometimes there are, you know, happy surprises. You discover certain things that you'd either forgotten about or you didn't know about when you're researching it. So that's given us both a kind of a favourite, if you like, of the films and TV series that we were looking at. For me, and it seems unusual saying this as a teetotaler, but it was a Drambuie advert. Because that advert was everywhere in the late 80s, with Robert Hardy running out of Drambuie and he has to phone to get a replacement bottle. And of course, you get this wonderful travelogue of Scotland all condensed into a commercial length, including Dundee Airport, which is where it's loaded on so it can go off this mystery island out in goodness knows where. But it's amazing, because I mean, just with those few seconds, you've got Dundee going all the way out there to, you know, to the whole world, and being showcased. But Julie's favourite was quite different, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it had to be the Cundies for me. Absolutely. When it came to, you know, Christmas in the Schemes, that was for me. I think because the videos, I'm guessing the guys, not giving too much away, probably around about the same age as me, and it was the home videos that they had from Christmas time. And the sort of things that just were absolutely reminiscent for me. And I think any Scottish childhood, absolutely. I just thought, I love anything like this. It doesn't take yourself too seriously. So I think that's another element of it. It's just, you know, getting the whole pop video, the fun stuff with that as well. So yes, it doesn't have to be all documentaries, fantastic though that is. It's also really good to have a bit of fun. And I think that's ultimately all the Dundonians and folk from Angus and the surrounding area we've found have been so nice and great fun, and have got behind us to do this, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things I have to say that DC Thompson would have been really proud about, as you can see the Cundies getting copies of the Ur Willie and Bruins annuals for their Christmas. So yes,
everybody should.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, in terms of how that projects onto the future, I mean, I think it's the best possible foundation, because already you have this very comprehensive body of work that draws in, you know, authentic depictions of local areas, things like, you know, Bob Servant Independent, where you get, you know, Broughty Ferry very much rendered in a positive and affectionate light, and then you get places like Auchmithy Beach near Arbroath, where it's completely different. It uses a sort of a fantasy background. So yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, you know, people wanted to look back on existing productions, they'll see so many different depictions, some of them realistic, some of them, you know, completely fantastical, you know, where Dundee has stood in for other places, and that's certainly true of Angus locations as well. So yeah, I mean, I think the sky's the limit. I don't think anything should deter filmmakers from using such an amazing place to tell their stories.
Yeah, and so many different ways they could do it, and in so many places, as you rightly say, just a bit further up the street, you've got a totally different landscape. If you want to go to the beach, you can go there too. Yeah. You know, it's just that I think the flexibility that's there is amazing, and we're quite happy to champion that.
Yes.
And as far as we're concerned, we don't come from Dundee, but in the time that we've been here, people have just been so helpful and so lovely that it's kind of like a second home to us now.
Yeah. And as we like to say to people, you've heard about the films, now go and visit the set.
Exactly.
Well, listen, if it's good enough for Justin Bieber, then it's good enough for anyone. I mean, you've just missed this with the book, because I think the book was just finished when, you know, speaking of Dundee Airport there was a picture just about 3 weeks ago of Justin Bieber at Dundee Airport, and everyone's like, "What's going on here?" And he was here for the golf, in St Andrews. But it turns out he ended up shooting a music video in one of the bars here in the city, which they edited together on the flight home back over to the States. And it's a bar called Abandoned Ship, a really, really cool looking place. So, so we're talking about, your music videos, you're talking about location, you're talking about doing something on the fly, because it pretty much was done on the fly. It was kind of done almost ad hoc. So like I say, if it's good enough for Bieber, it's good enough for anyone. So check that one out if you've not seen it. It's bringing it right up to date, I think, in a way that no one was kind of expecting, I think, and that is what I found as well. It's kind of a lot of unexpected things happen in the city. A lot of things that take you by surprise, and I think it does go back to that kind of DC Thompson spirit of kind of competing on a global level. And for example, the comics industry. Look what happened to the comics industry in America, which is now, for most people, a film and TV franchise. Marvel is more synonymous with a younger generation with movies now than it is with the comics. And I do know that DC Thompsons have moved into, animation, live action filmmaking as well. Do you see even more potential in that, do you think, going forward, and kind of maybe looking back at some of the IP from the city and seeing where that goes next?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I look at films like The Illusionist, and how that taps into the tremendous amount of animation talent in Dundee.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of it, is the fact that really people shouldn't be hemmed in by any particular expectation about their creative expression. I mean, there's so much to be done now, whether it's rotoscoping, whether it's CGI. I mean, even things like deepfakes. We see more of that now in the Marvel movies, where people are being de-aged. So, I mean, I think there are really tremendous opportunities now with that new technology to make things happen, and perhaps to bring alive things we didn't really imagine would be the case even just a few years ago.
And I think, having been up to see the Coaster Real-Time Lab as well, what was very obvious to us was your ability to flex and look at new things and look at things in a slightly different way. Maybe even when they first come to visit you and say, "I want to do that," and you can say, but you can do this, this, and this as well. And I think that is also a very kind of Dundonian trait I've found. And just like Justin Bieber, let's be honest, a few years ago, your phone couldn't have taken videos and stuff like that. And now he's, bringing out, we'll just film a quick video while we're here and then edit it on the way home. It's the scope to do things now has never been greater. And I'm sure that's only going to go from strength to strength from that point of view.
Yeah, we say this a lot, and it's democratizing the industry to a certain extent. You've still got to have some sort of vision or a good script or a good idea, but you don't need the $1 million budgets, if you're clever and if you see a potential, or a new way of using the technology, for example, or even doing something in quite a lo-fi way, again, is another kind of, there's opportunities there that weren't there before. There's multiple examples of people shooting on their phones because the resolution is good enough. So that kind of democratization of the technology, for me, can only be a good thing, and it's part of the ethos, to be honest with you, of CoStar, is that we want more people to get access to this type of facility to see what clever things they can come up with. Because at the moment, there's a barrier to entry for this technology. You've even people I know who work at Industrial Light and Magic haven't been on a virtual production set. There is still a bit of a disconnect there, purely because time is money, and when you're on these productions, you don't have the time to experiment or to play with it. And that's what we're trying to do with CoStar, is to give creative people the space to come in and do something different with it, ideally. Not just replicate a Hollywood film, but to do something that hasn't been done before, or to utilize some local talent, or to take some characters that were developed in the city and move it into a different format, you know. And I think that's what struck me about the list of productions that you've covered in the book, is that how diverse they are. That kind of surprised me. I just wonder where do we go next? You know, that's the question. What is the next thing? And what is the next thing for you guys? What are you working on next as well? I know your books tend to have certain themes, and you know, you have done quite a lot of different publications based around different locations and different type of mediums. What's next for you guys, and where do you see the industry as a whole going next?
Oh, now there's a loaded question. Try and find an easier one than that for us, Phil. I mean, my goodness, it seems to change a bit every week. So that's quite that's quite a tough one. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I think people's expectations of cinema are changing, which is really interesting. I'm seeing a huge gulf now between critical expectation and audience response, which I find really interesting. And I think that's feeding into a lot of engagement with independent cinema, as people more and more now, just in the same way as broadcast television is giving way to streaming TV, I think we're going to see more and more people now searching out more independently made film and TV productions. And as a result of that, I think it's tremendously exciting, because it's opening up new creative roads for people. I think there's going to be a built-in audience now. I think people just have to perhaps connect with it in ways we aren't so far. And I think the easiest way to do that, of course, is to make people aware of what's available and how they can access it. So for that reason, I mean, just as you mentioned, I mean, you're able now to do things on a much more slender budget than was the case even just a few years ago. And you look at some of the films in the book where they've been made on a budget of £1,000, £5,000. You know, that wouldn't buy you lunch on a Hollywood movie. So it's very interesting to see just, you know, how inventive people have been. And I don't think we've seen the last of that inventiveness. I think it's only just getting started.
Yeah. So what else we're doing? Well, all we can say is watch this space maybe around about the end of the first quarter of next year.
Yep.
And just, you know, keep looking at what we do at Extremis and what we do on our various social media channels, and then you'll get a better idea of what we're up to. Great.
Well, thanks for taking us through that and your insight into the industry. And it's a really well-researched book. I've certainly recommend it to my students, especially students who are coming into the area who are not aware of this, and also students who are from this area and practitioners who are probably not aware of a lot of the productions that have happened. Because like I said, it surprised me in more than a couple of occasions of what's actually been filmed here, you know. And I hope we keep on surprising people with the content and with what's happening in there. And certainly we're looking to surprise people with the content that we produce through the studio. So thanks for taking time out and chatting. And the book is available in all the usual outlets, but Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones, Blackwell, Foyles. I thoroughly recommend it, and look forward to what you're working on next as well.
Yeah, well, thanks very much.
Thank you, and keep on filming.